Some of the countries that her work is shown in are Thailand, Pakistan, the USA, Japan, and Italy. Closer to Toronto, she has exhibits at the Tex has exhibited at the Textile Museum of Toronto, Robert McLaughlin Gallery in Oshawa, the Art Gallery of Windsor, the Aga Khan Museum, and the ROM, just to name a few. Although her artistic practice, along with, excuse me, her artistic practice, she teaches workshops, serves on numerous arts councils, boards, such as a hospital board even, galleries. She also co-founded Art Address, an interactive space for artistic discourse in Oakville. I really encourage you to visit her website for an astounding wealth of information about her own work and the influences upon her work. Lots of things to explore. She gives you all kinds of resources. So, obviously, a very busy woman, which makes me even more thrilled to thank you and introduce you. Thank you for spending your time with us today, sharing. Over to Tazeen.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here today and present my work and a little bit of my journey with and share it with all of you present today. I think I'll start sharing my screen first and then speak more about the work. Let's see if this. All right. Are you able to see my screen clearly?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just, so as Jan was mentioning, I am a contemporary visual artist and I work across multiple mediums, which includes drawing, painting, sculpture, installation, video, and I also work on live performances as well. But today I'll be focusing mostly on one aspect of my practice, that is the use of a singular motif, and talk about its evolution in my work over 2 decades now. And the motif I'm referring to is the image of a cockroach that I'm most recognized by, and how that has become a powerful metaphor in my work. But before I go into my own work, I think it's important to mention, where my art training is based in. So I am, just a second. Yeah. So I am trained in the historical and traditional painting style of South Asia and Persia, commonly known as miniature painting, or often referred to as Mughal art or art of the book in the Islamic art context. So probably most of you here today are familiar with examples such as these paintings because you see them, in multiple museums around the world. And also in Toronto, the Aga Khan Museum and the ROM has an amazing collection of historical miniature paintings from South Asia and Persia. So just to really, really briefly touch upon it, I mean, so how it interacts with my work is, so these paintings were historically created to accompany illustrious and important handwritten illuminated manuscripts. So it's an art form that is practically missing in the art education in the Western art history teachings. But just to give a little bit of historical context, these we during early 16th century, these the Safavid dynasty were ruling the Persian Empire, which is, which then included areas which are contemporary Iran and Azerbaijan. And so over their 200 year span of rule, they were really huge patrons of the arts and literature. And So basically, they commissioned uh, court studios where artists were to illustrate handwritten manuscripts, stories, and based on historical moments or literature, important literature, poems, and also religious context. And meanwhile, when we look at the Indian miniature painting history, they were mostly predominantly reached its prime during the Mughal rule in India, undivided India, which ranged from like the 16th to the 18th century AD. There was a rich period of Indian art history. So I won't again not go into a lot of detail, but just point out some of the prominent elements and characteristics of this historical practice is they were mostly stylized and naturalistic and did not follow the rules of realism that we study in, art painting and that we follow now. They used a really unique method of creating perspective, which was not the 2-point or the 1-point perspective we learned, but in a way you can refer to as a pile of perspective, where within one plane, various aspects of a story were narrated together. So you could see the foreground, the background, the middle ground, all in one plane. And the purpose of this is the artist devised many characteristics or really unique methodologies to that. How do you tell a story or illustrate an entire text within one frame? And I guess you can draw parallel with medieval art in the Western art history context. But this was a very sophisticated style and school of painting. They used flat color, application was flat, shadows were missing. But most important aspect was really strong, delicate lines that defined the outlines of the paintings. We also see the use of border within each for each painting, which were again very elaborate and delicately designed, and motifs, and used arabesque or floral or fauna motifs in them. The color palettes were unique to each style and school of painting. We also see the use of, as you can see in one of these paintings, the use of geometric patterns and architecture to actually create divisions within a plane artistically. Uh, the stories were told, a lot of symbology was used to tell stories. But one of the really important aspect is because this art form takes a long time to create these paintings. Um, the entire discipline of the body, the mind, and the way you enter these drawings as an artist was really important. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me, that how do you get to that focus and train your body in a way that your entire being comes onto the tip of that singular brush with a singular hair. So, so the image you see now, I just put a few slides, images together of the various schools within this art form, which were created based on the different areas within the Indian subcontinent. So each area had its own style, its own distinct way of interpreting these paintings. Some of these schools are important school are the Pahari school, the Rajasthani school of painting, or the Deccan in the south. So each one of them, as you can see, I mean, not much in these, but I would really encourage people to really look into this art form and its history and the work that's created in this style. So after when the British were ruling India, we see a slow decline in this art form. And of course, with the arrival of printmaking and printing and photography, we practically see an end to this art form, to the point that it became predominantly copies of replicas of old masters were just created for the tourist industry, and it kind of lost its glory as a contemporary practice. But later in early 1990s, we in an art school in Pakistan, in Lahore, Pakistan, called the National College of Arts, we see a new revival of this art form, which was now known as the neo miniature movement. And what happened then is it was introduced as a contemporary practice where students like myself in that department were encouraged to, they were led through a rigorous learning of the miniature painting processes. That is preparation of the paper, um, making your own brushes. The paper preparation, the grinding of colors. And so basically following the traditional methodology, even the way you would sit in your studio or create the environment. But spending months mastering the technique by replicating the originals. But then students were or are still encouraged to create distinct and individual contemporary vocabulary within the same style of their own. So that movement really took on a life of its own, and where it was an art form that belonged to the roots belonged to that region. And some students or artists really interpreted it in various ways in their own unique styles. So I'm lucky that I was fortunate that I'm one of the artists, in fact one of the pioneers of this movement, as I graduated in 1996 from that same institute. Now different universities offer this as a course. But strangely, you don't see contemporary miniature painting taught in India or even in Iran in that context. But somehow, it's very prevalent in Pakistan. So I thought it was important to briefly touch upon this because, so even in my work today, the tenacity of the tradition lingers, right? So it is important that training translates to whatever work I do. Just some of the images of how, the tools that are used while doing this art form. So now coming to my work, I am going to focus on the motif of the cockroach. So this is actually the very, very first painting when I used the cockroach in my work. And this metaphor or this image came to me when in 2001 and 2 when the US led and its allies launched the war on terror. I was still living in Pakistan and practicing. I was an emerging artist then, and so basically I what we could hear in the news or see, and it was overwhelming. And for me, it was like my first close encounter with a war around me. And just the idea of how war diminishes the value of human life, the effects, right? Where what I saw on news was just regarding deaths as numbers. Um, that was what I wanted to respond to. And the first thing that came to me is a phrase in Urdu, which translates to diminishing the value to that of an insect. And I wanted to use that in my work. And so I decided to paint a cockroach, a dead cockroach image in my work to talk about, and in large numbers, to talk about, that same concept. In this image, what you see is also, you can probably see influences how I'm borrowing the language of the traditional art form in the objects that you see in red, painted in red. I don't know if it's recognizable for some of you, but we used to have these pesticide pumps where that you spray the bug with, and work with it manually. So I kind of stylized those and created that image, and then painting them in a floral decorative motif borrowed from the Mughal painting style to kind of denounce royalty, power, and beauty. So in a way, in this painting, what I'm trying to say is that the machines or that are killing the bugs are presented more beautifully than the actual death. So that play is always there. Again, using the cockroach kind of adds a satirical um, idea or play with an with a dark subject. I was borrowing for my titles, keeping the pun, kind of using pesticide labels as my painting titles. So it'll be like keep away from eyes, keep away from children, or use in a small area before use. So that play was present in my work. Some of the text you see in this painting is from the US immigration form. So I've kind of erased it and it's used it as a background. Um, Again, so these are all early works that I'm sharing right now, 2002 to 2004. I'm trying different experiments within the medium. I'm always trying to push the boundaries of the practice, but still what you see is I'm keeping the kind of a plane, which is more in line with the traditional style, with a border and an image at the back. In this painting, uh, I was pregnant with my first child when I was doing this one in 2004, and um, I was losing a lot of hair, so I incorporated the hair in my painting as well. I don't know if you're able to see it that clearly in this work. So around this time, we immigrated. We came to Canada in 2003. And what was most interesting for me was, when you change your location, when I moved here, how did the narrative of the war changed completely? Uh, and that was very fascinating for me that, how I was seeing the news channels or reading the news or seeing people's reactions in Pakistan and how it is so different when I'm here in the West now. And I wanted to speak to that feeling of how narratives switch based on where you are and who is telling the story becomes more important than the story itself. And to comment or to talk about that, and also I wanted to further this work. I was feeling I had so much to say through this motive that I started thinking of documenting histories. And when thinking about documenting histories, the first thing that came to my mind was museum displays, because they are the holders of histories in so many ways. And since I was working with an insect, I just thought entomology museums makes more sense. So I started my research. I started going to the entomology museums here in Toronto. I was really lucky to get into the ROMS collection of insects, and I was assisted by the staff. And I started looking into how, in museum language, insects are labeled. They are um, they're stored and presented. And I started learning how those labels are created and then kind of retranslating that knowledge, that language into my two-dimensional work, painting, because it just made perfect sense to me, to talk about how political propaganda parallels the narratives, right, of archiving history, that who tells the story becomes important. So then I started mimicking those displays through my work, and I went to science centers and got the actual pins, archival pins used, and the paper labels that are used. But of course, instead of the actual cockroach, it was my two-dimensional painting that I started pinning. And so in that process, as you see in this work, what happens is when you so in this, I've sort of laid the cockroach open for investigation, that, how you kind of study something, you open it up. So also commenting on, people and cultures that we don't understand or associate with, we immediately have the tendency to be, to study them or to understand them, put them under microscope and kind of label them the way we want to. And to that effect, in this painting, what is interesting is, as soon as people see these kind of work, they immediately come to the label first. So the label draws you in. But what my label says is something as simple as red or hair. But again, red being the color and hair being another marker of how you distinguish cultures and recognize people or categorize people. So it's a play on that. So while in this, but as you can see, the for me it is also important to kind of retain the 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 labor of art making itself. For me, that is also really important, right? It's my vocabulary, my subject, my concern is one, but how do I say it in a way that it's aesthetically pleasing to look at, and that it retains that probably I don't know the right word, the essence of art making itself too. So I take a pleasure in that. This is a zoom in of that painting. So for me, even like the pinning of individual pins into my paper is like building up a painting through strokes. Um, so some of these works, this is another painting from that series where I again uh, from my research on the war, I took 10 days of civilian casualties in Iraq when the war in 2007. And then I rewrote that information into the way entomology museums write texts. So I reinterpreted it and then wrote it like so it becomes a cryptic text. Nobody can, when you see a painting, you don't understand it, but it's there, it's hidden. Um, so I would use information like what weapon was used, who was the target, how many casualties took place, and the day that that news was recorded. And then I deliberately hid that, like, kind of censored that information. Um, Again, another example of work from that same series. So the other thing I wanted to do was to present them as entomology museum displays. So a lot of my work was presented in boxes as and displayed flat. So then I'm taking the pleasure, like taking, pushing the boundaries of showing painting, not just on the wall, but actually treating them as sculptural and installation. So while I'm doing this, I also started researching on the cockroach itself. And the more I learned or read about it, the more interesting it became for me as a metaphor, because there were so many layers that I could, learn from it. Just scientific facts, or, as one of the myth, or probably it's true, is that the resilience of a cockroach, that it would survive any catastrophe. That's the most common one that people know. But interestingly, because it does adapt to whatever um, pesticide is developed to kill the cockroach. And it is not the most dangerous insect on the planet, but yet it is universally considered gross, no matter what culture, what place you're from. And to me, that became really important to talk about my concerns, my political concerns as well. That it is a household pet that lives among you, with you. So in a way, it also narrates my, like the immigrant journey, or the dilemma of the immigrant. Um, and then I was also dealing with some really serious matter from the war vocabulary, For example, in this painting, which is titled May Irritate Eyes, I was referencing the gruesome images that were bombarded on the media around 2005, I believe, which showed the abuse of prisoners in the Abu Ghraib prison. The Iraqi men where they were piled up naked, and images were circulating. So this painting talks about, it says Article 3 talks about the Geneva Convention. The Article 3 in the Geneva Convention talks about the treatment of prisoners of war. So I made a reference to that here, and then used entomology language like skull and skin of male adult. So that's what the label says, and sort of documenting the number of casualties to date. This is another painting from, as you can see, like now we're looking at work from 2009. So it is this motif that keeps developing, and somewhere in the course, the dead cockroach became alive. Right now, it has the drawing is more alive now, and it's also referencing how the war or the narrative was evolving over the years for us, in the media, in the political discourse, in various conspiracy theories, um, and the more you learned, the more confusing it became. So in a way, I also wanted to reference that it's becoming an identity of its own. Like my cockroach is not always dead now. It is alive and morphing and changing. So in this particular painting, which I call May Contain Coarse Language, um, you what I did was I took four quotes from four political leaders then. So the President Obama, a quote from him, and then a quote from the Taliban spokesperson, and the Pakistani Prime Minister, and I removed the names and use the quotes. So when you see the painting or you read the labels, you cannot tell who said what, which quote belongs to who. So in a way, again, a play on how the politicians who are running the war machines always speak the same language. And I think um, nothing more compelling than the times we are in now, and yet another war is upon us, and we hear the same stories, the same narrative, the same things again and again and again, and never learn from history. So it's kind of that's where I'm coming from. And another one from the same series where I've kind of again talking about how we kind of putting, using the idea of studying something into detail. So I removed one leg from the image and kind of zoomed it in larger so that you can really investigate and study it. And now you would see that this one motif is becoming like is reoccurring in all my work. It's so I kind of stuck to that as my like to symbolize beauty and details. So just to point out that all of these paintings, most of them are done on hand-prepared paper, which is called vasli, which we learn in the tradition of miniature painting. And the singular hairbrush is used to do all the delicate line work. So it's all hand-drawn, what you see. Then around 2009 and 10, I was preparing works for an exhibition in Pakistan, and I wanted, and at that time there was a military operation happening in the country against its own people in the Swat Valley, and so I also wanted to talk about how when narratives, like the counter narrative as well, that I feel that if has gone unchecked in certain parts of the world, which is giving birth to radicalism and extremism as well. And it's kind of, it's developed over years of unchecked, um, you can say, sentiments. And so in a way, I'm sort of talking about that it's using maps and from a aerial view of a city, that these pipes are coming from every house, and then creating like an assembly line, a factory-like narrative. So kind of talking about that aspect as well, that for me, uh, it's also a representation that how my faith has been misinterpreted in many ways in terms of, and has been abused to that point where, I'm put in a position where I am to justify, in that aspect of what is happening around us. Um, and I don't agree with that either. So I was also wanted to keep my, museum entomology, that kind of pristine displays idea. I wanted to replicate how, insects are preserved in petri dishes, or in like these, how we see, butterflies preserved in acrylic, and so I wanted to replicate that. And so I did some experiments and came with this material called lucite, where I get them fabricated. My paintings are embedded in this acrylic material. So now what happens is they're sculptural, but you can also see it from all sides. They're three-dimensional in that way. And so I use that by creating layers in my work. And it was a very interesting experiment, because the chemical reacted to my colors and they changed some, which added to the work. And um, so these are single cast in lucite, which is a form of resin and acrylic. So around 2013, a big shift in my practice came, is when, so till then I was still focusing on painting as my medium mostly. But in 2013, I was invited by the curator at the Toronto Pearson Airport, and the curator then at the Art Gallery of Mississauga. And they commissioned a project and asked me to create works for the Terminal 1. There was a space dedicated for art, displaying art. So for me, that became really, really an important invite, because the airport as a space itself is so important when we talk about security and security checks. And so I mean that being invited into that space to create work, I really wanted to respond to that space and not just bring my paintings to that space and put them up. So I requested the curator that if I'm able to create something new, which I don't know at that point what it would be, but if you would allow me to come and photograph or that space and do some interventions, and that would lead to what works come out of it. And they were really, I'm glad that they were open to that suggestion. So I was given these security passes where I could go anywhere in the airport, which in itself was a very, um, interesting experience, that here I am, I'm allowed into the areas where I normally, people wouldn't be allowed to go. So what I did was I did quickly made some paper cutouts of my cockroaches, and I would take them to the airport with me, and I would lay them in spaces and photograph and videograph them from a distance, and also see how people would react to it. So then make them walk into different places, and even put them in the waiting area, or I was allowed to go where the baggage comes, and even to the runway. I put the images, the cutouts. So I mean, this exercise was very spontaneous of, taking cutouts to the airport, but then this also gave me the idea of creating the artwork based on this. I liked what I saw when I was placing these cutouts. So the final installation that came out, other than these pictures and videos, um, here I'm on the runway with the cockroaches. So the final installation that came out of it looked something like this. So these were cut in acrylic. They were these, each one is individually cut. Then I painted each one this particular red and created this pattern with the cockroaches. Now, the pattern itself is, you know, again, the reason is that when you see it, you in the in first view you don't see the cockroach, right? You see a beautiful pattern on the wall, but only when you look closely you realize these are cutouts of an insect. Um, for me, the pattern also references the jali, the cutout. In Islamic architecture, the use of um, the lattice screen. It's also which represent that the pattern also represents a systematic march. It could be read as a military march, or how you systematically move people in refugee camps or immigration, or and referencing that as well. I wanted to add something more to this installation, so I requested if I can get the airport seats, the one that are in the lounge, used in the lounge. And luckily, again, I was given a set of these 3 chairs to use in my work. And again, so I painted them in the style, the pattern that I've been using in my painting, from the miniature painting style. And to me, these chairs also became really important because, you know, so many people have sat on them previously and used them. And it's sort of an in-between space uh, at the airport, because you're coming from one place and you're taking a journey, and you don't know what that journey holds for you, as well as you don't know who's sitting next to you. So in a way, these chairs were symbolically representing, my position as a person who lives between cultures, right? You're neither here, you're not there, kind of space. So it's an in-between space. So I thought that really worked well with this installation. So since then, this particular installation has been presented at various places. It becomes site specific wherever it goes, based on the walls and the space of the gallery. I titled it a holding pattern because holding pattern in flight lingo is a term used when a plane is not given permission to land. So it hovers in the air and waits for permission, and that is called a holding pattern, which again, was significant to my narrative. The detail of the image. Yeah, so at the Art Gallery of Windsor, what I had done was on one side of the wall, I had created this pattern and the chairs were placed, but on the back, I was given another area. What I did was I created a chaos by showing as the bugs are dropping from a manhole, kind of, used a something that is used in gutters and created that um, feel. In another show in Pakistan, I used drain pipes and perforated them and then created these, like showing that little cockroaches are coming out of them from that. So then from there on, my painting took on form sculptural and more installation. But again, the motive of the cockroach keeps evolving with every work. Sometimes people ask me, when is this cockroach going to die in your work? And I said, I have so much to say through it. It just keeps giving as a motif. Then one of the largest installations that I've done was at a building in Pakistan during the first Karachi Biennial in 2017. It was on a main commercial street, and this time I used paper cutouts let me see if I have a zoom in. Yes. To create this pattern. This building itself was very significant. It used to house the Theosophical Society of Pakistan, and it came um, under threat, and the building was once set on fire by extremist fundamentalists because of the society, and then eventually it was later restored and is functional again. So I thought it's important for my work to talk about ideas of tolerance and peace and those through this work. Then again, I'm drawn kind of for creating an installation. This one was at the Robert McLaughlin Gallery. So I have, I use these cutouts, the cockroach cutouts, and then I create patterns now, not just on the wall, but as motifs on the floor as well, by individually placing each one. Again, to me, this was referencing two things. One was, the idea of a manhole. Again, you think of cockroach. I was thinking, what is the source now? And the source is, like manholes and the hidden places that we don't normally see. And so one of the reason of going to the circle was that. And then also, I also feel that the idea of the resilience that the cockroach brings forward is also is embedded in community building. So I wanted to bring those ideas as well. Ideas of hope, ideas of coming together. So I guess one thing that's sort of central, like sometimes people ask me, what is the cockroach really in your work? Is it the oppressor or is it the oppressed, right? But I think for me, the cockroach represents the ideology more than anything else. It's the ideology of fear, how fear is used as a mechanism to justify, atrocities. So I think that's what the cockroach itself represents for me. Then, of course, I did make actual manhole covers using my motif for one of my shows. So they're cast in iron and following the same grid and the exact specifications of a manhole cover. And kind of talking about how the tendency to conceal and to hide through beauty, the grotesque in our world. Then I was craving to paint again, and so I brought those motif making and those patterns back to my painting technique and to paper and brush, and a series of paintings came out of that exploration, where now I'm actually removing the body of the cockroach itself and just focusing on the outline and the pattern making that is embedded in that design. So these are all created, like singular hairbrush, and they're paintings, and with very little margin of error within that frame, just layering the outline of the cockroach. This was done most recently, comparatively, like 2022 at the Bangkok Biennial. They had given me a space in their museum, Siam, where I created these 3 windows with the pattern. But at the same time, they gave me different areas of the museum where I could create installations. So one of them was I created this installation on the floor passage in the museum. So with the idea that people had to actually step on them. So that kind of amplified my idea that you don't know how to navigate this artwork. Do you step on it or you don't step on it? But again, it is the cockroach. You're supposed to step on it and squish it, because that's the only way to get rid of it. Then more recently, what I have started doing with the with this image is actually um, trying to creating a series of drawing where I'm breaking it into a fictional language. So to a language that is based on fear and a language that is kind of speaking to how, in today's time, we are so desensitized to death and destruction. It's becoming an everyday like a language. So and when you create a language, a new language, you have to learn the letters, you have to learn the alphabet. So in these drawings, what I'm doing is I'm teaching you how to draw a cockroach as a language, as words. So I'm breaking the body parts of it, and probably, I don't know if you were familiar with, but when we were learning to write English, cursive, there were these worksheets that we had to go through of dotted lines, and you learn how to write the letters. So I'm doing kind of the same thing with the cockroach, like dividing the same dead image into various parts and teaching you how to draw them. Each one of these sheets, what I've done is I've hand embossed the lines, which are not clear in these slides, but and then using arrows and markers, which are all these are all paintings, teaching you how to write a dead cockroach. Um, so another aspect of my practice is drawing words, but I'm not, keeping an eye on the clock. I'm not going to go into details of that, but I just show a couple of images of what I choose singular words or phrases in Urdu, and I repeatedly draw them for hours at a time, sometimes in my studio and sometimes in live performances, kind of bringing my outward political stance in an inward way, right? He's like focusing quietly, reflecting, and kind of talking about our shared vulnerabilities and fears, and kind of focusing on that. Um, so. So yeah, so most of these drawings come from a place of empathy. The words that I choose are meaningful, multi-layered, and poetic in nature. Words like right and wrong, drawn repeatedly, which makes you think of what is right and what is wrong. Um, words like hope, words like peace, but multi-layered in meaning. Um, and just gonna Yeah, so this is an image of one of my recent performances, just last year at the Edinburgh International Festival. I partnered with live musicians, and kind of it's an hour-long performance where people witness how the drawing is created, where I just start from a point and my body becomes part of the image making itself. Um, and I guess, um, yeah, just. Yeah. So one of the drawings that I did as a commission for the TD Bank was created into a video where I wrote the word khayal, which means care, for an hour in a go. And I believe I wanted to end the presentation on this particular word today because I believe to care, in today's growing atmosphere of religious and political intolerance and the fear of the other is, and the wars around us, it is really important that we take a moment to slow down and, care for ourselves, care for each other, um, care for the environment, and really thoughtfully consider how we approach the world as social beings. And I think I will end the presentation here. And I'd be happy to, if people have questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Tazeen. It's just amazing.
Thank you.
I'll put the gallery. So do we have any questions? I didn't, oh, one person's written in the chat. Let's see. Nope, not yet. Okay, let's open the floor. Who's got a question?
Well, it's not so much a question. I just want to thank you for an absolutely mind-blowing presentation, and the way in which you use a single object, the cockroach, in so many multifaceted ways, and how you connect it with your um, personal and political beliefs about the world and how it reflects on the world. It's just astonishing how this cockroach just keeps going and going and going. But I particularly liked very much at the beginning where you're observing the war and thinking about the cockroach, and then you transform that into that's how it seems for the people who are dying from this war. And then going into the ROM and looking at insects and how they're presented, and you sort of um, taking that metaphor. um, I mean, it's a very powerful beginning, and 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 the transformation. As we go through your work, and we see those three beautiful windows, and the pattern, the movement into a kind of abstraction. It just was a wonderful presentation and so timely. And thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for your comments and appreciation. Yeah, thank you.
I see that Miriam has a couple questions. Do you want to read those off, Janet?
Okay, sorry, I couldn't. Do you have any suggestions for learning miniature painting here in Canada? And Miriam, well, she said your work resonated with her and she is in awe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariam.
I think we all are.
Oh, no, thank you so much. There are a couple of people that teach miniature painting. I mean, I teach workshops as well, and I can definitely connect you to some people who do teach it. So if you'd like, you can send me a text separately, and I would definitely connect you to the people who teach miniature painting. But it's hard to find, but I guess it's important in a way that it really taught me how to discipline. And I think I learned patience and discipline of your body, and the way you even your breathing patterns is important when you're painting in that style. So which is a good exercise for everyone, I feel.
I'm kind of interested. You were taught in such a traditional practice. Who were the models that caused you to basically leap into such a contemporary practice and multidisciplinary from a background in very traditional work?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, like when I entered this, it was in a formal art school, right? It was which of course had like state-of-the-art printmaking studio, painting studios, sculpture studios, and contemporary teachers teaching it. But if a couple of professors in the 1990s came up with this notion of that why are we not teaching an art form that belongs to the area, right? Why we've just adopted the Western art teaching methodologies and been doing that for years. So I think, but we didn't have a lot of resources or teacher, in that respect. So what we had to rely on was the traditional methodology of learning this technique. There weren't many books written on miniature painting. In fact, our books were the Western catalogs, because what happened during colonialism was all of these paintings were taken out from their actual context and the book, and individually is spread around the world in different museums in the West, right?
Right.
So the paintings we in Pakistan, traditional painting we saw were in catalogs of these museums, and very few originals.
No, what I actually meant was, so sorry, Fiona, you've got your hand up, so you're next.
Yeah, so I was
What I
coming
meant
to
was
your question too. So I mean, in that respect, when I came to school, that was the expectation already set, that 3 years you're going to rigorously learn the methodology through replicating old masters, paintings from the old masters. So we were required to do a portrait, a full scene, and like there was a course designed. But by the time we get to our fourth year of learning, it was asked or expected that you would use that knowledge and create a contemporary painting. So that was how I was taught and that was, but then each student on their own way expanded the boundaries of that style and created something new.
Great. Fiona.
Thank you. Thank you, Tazeen, for the generosity of your talk. That was wonderful to listen to. I was really interested in the times in your practice where you have made interventions in a space where your work is not expected to be seen. I was wondering if you could speak more to how you choose a space, how much the space itself informs the work you're about to do, and maybe if there were other spaces that you have considered in the past or are considering in the future that you would like to intervene within.
So most of the spaces I haven't chosen myself in a ways that they're invitation based. And once that invite comes, and then there is a process of visiting the site, then you get to choose where you want, or what. For example, like I think the one time that I really had a role in actually just choosing the space was the airport, because there was again an invite, but if you remember the image of so it was like a glass case already, and I think the expectation was that I would bring pretty pictures and I would be displaying them there. But then the idea that was, I took a risk and proposed that what if I don't do that and I actually interact with the actual space of the airport, which is so significant to where I'm coming from. So, but then there are times that, like in Bangkok, okay, those were the only 3 windows I could use. And, then you work with that as an artist. I mean, all of you would know that for site-specific works, the space is there, and then you go back into the drawing board and decide how you interact with that space and create. In terms of my wish spaces, I really haven't thought, or at least they won't come to me now that I'm on the spot. But yeah, I mean, I think what I enjoy most is where I get the opportunity for public interaction. For example, the installation I did on the building's facade in Pakistan was completely outside in the open in a very busy, dense downtown commercial neighborhood. So there was constant flux of people who had absolutely no formal art language or training, right? And the curiosity or the questions they would ask me while I'm doing that installation, which was spread over 5 days, was really amazing, right? That real interaction of people asking you questions of why and what, and then adding their own comments that, okay, why didn't you do a spider instead, because that would mean that. And so those, and children, the way children reacted or associated, and the questions. So yes, for me, that's always the most pleasurable experiences. The other experience that I really enjoy and kind of cherish is when in every exhibition of mine, the audience, somebody or the other comes up to me and tell me their cockroach story.
Mm.
And I think it's so interesting that that feel or that urge they have, that they have to tell me how, what is their encounter been with a cockroach.
Mhm. It's a kind of a connection that they feel the
Yeah,
need to make. It's so
yeah,
interesting too, because when you're in those spaces that you talked about, there are democratic spaces, like you said.
yeah,
There's no gatekeeping to a gallery space
yeah,
that people think, oh, I have to know something before I go
yeah,
see the thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So taking away that gatekeeping allows people to connect to the work, to you, and to their own story so much more fulsomely. Thanks
Yeah. So
again.
that's what I enjoy the most. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think we
you.
have time to stretch for one more question. We're a little over, but anybody, one last question? No? Okay, Jan, over to you.
Okay.
Someone,
There's some is there questions in the chat or no?
I really admire your work. It's wonderful and very well explained. What materials do you use in your installation? So quickly, without one question, and then we'll
Yeah,
have.
so it depends. Like the installation that you saw, they were acrylic. The cockroaches were cut in acrylic. But I've just touched one aspect of my practice. But if you see my Instagram or my website, I worked with fabric, I worked with textiles, I worked with a lot of other materials too. So, but yeah, in the cockroaches were particularly laser cut in acrylic.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tazeen. I really, I took so many notes. I have so many things to follow up and think about, and I'll spare you my cockroach story. But I don't know if you noticed, I was laughing through much of the airport stuff. I grew up as a child of a ramp service worker, the person who cleans your airplane and loses your luggage and all that. So occasionally got behind the scenes for some of those things. And it just struck me as so humorous, your work in the airlines or airport, especially in the context of what heavy subject matter you're you're dealing with. That for me, that was sort of that comic relief in the middle. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Again, everybody check out her website. There is so much more information about her, about the influences that she's used. She's so generous with giving you links for other things. And before we all say goodbye, next month, April 16th, is Michael Black, who's an artist that I believe currently lives in Port Perry, abstract landscape and an educator. So you'll be interested to catch up with him too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for inviting me and for patiently listening to my
Oh,
presentation.
thank you.
Have a nice rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.